Brands on Brands.
Hey, what's up? Today on the show, we have Chris Doe, an Emmy Award-winning designer, as well as the host of the very popular The Futur podcast. Check it out.
In a world where content is king and your reputation is your brand, how do you build a brand that matters? Welcome to Brands on Brands, a home for those that think different and push their boundaries. This is where branding that matters lives. Now, here is your host, Brandon Birkmeyer.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Brands on Brands. I'm Brandon Birkmeyer, your personal branding coach. And today we have an interview with Chris Doe. One of my favorite podcasts out there right now is The Futur with this host, Chris Doe. He is also an Emmy Award-winning designer, director, CEO, and chief strategist of Blind, and the founder of The Futur. TheFutur.com, that's TheFutur.com, is an online education platform with the mission of teaching 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. If you ever listen to his podcast, The Futur, they talk about this all the time. It's how to build a business for creative designers, creative directors, freelance creators, those kinds of things, and so much more. He now has a whole online school for business. You can all check that out at his website. But our conversation today dives into the business of personal branding, how to run a creator business, how he got into doing speaking. He did teach for over 15 years, by the way, at Art Center College of Design, as well as Otis College of Art and Design. And he's lectured all over the country. And the way he teaches and how he used that to grow some speaking opportunities, and then eventually a massive YouTube channel and podcast that turned into this education business, all is part of the conversation today on the show. Ready for you guys to listen and learn, take notes. Great interview. So happy we had Chris on the show. Check it out.
Brands on Brands.
All right, let's get going. I'm excited to bring you our guest today, Chris Doe. First off, Chris, thank you so much for coming on our show today.
My pleasure, Brandon. Happy to do this.
The reason I'm excited is we get to dive into a couple of things that are close to my heart, which are running a creator business and personal branding. The show is all about that. So let's start there with personal branding. I'd love to hear from your mouth, like, what does that mean to you and why does it matter?
Great question. We understand what branding is, and I think we should begin there, and then we can understand the differences between branding and, say, personal branding, because it's a term that both terms are used a lot. I think misused more often than correctly used. It was a funny thing because I was at a real estate conference and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Chris, I'm sorry, our people don't get branding." I'm like, "That's okay. People in branding don't get branding, so we're all in good company here. No judgment." I love Marty Neumeier's definition of brand, which is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So it's not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. Jeff Bezos goes on to say, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room as a company. We understand that. So corporations spend a lot of time, energy, money, and effort into developing influence over the perception and associations that people have with a particular brand. And there's a very specific test that we can run to see if you have a brand. So a product without a story is a commodity. So when you buy bags of kernels of corn, it doesn't really matter. It's going to sell for the lowest price as long as it meets a certain threshold of quality. So you can say that the strength of your brand is the premium that you're able to charge over the lowest price alternative. So when you buy a bottle of water at the supermarket, let's say it's 50 cents. Let's say that's the lowest price commodity. It's generic yellow label water. And then if you're able to charge for the similar volume of liquid, $2.50, that's the strength of your brand. You're able to command essentially a $2 premium over the lower cost alternative. And this is what brands fight for all the time. They want to be able to tell you a story to help you feel connected to the tribe, right, or the cause that they're after. And this is very important in our modern definition of self and identity. So we understand that, I think. We take this now to personal branding. So you take all the corporate concepts, you apply it to person and say, what do people associate with you? And it's very different now because you don't have a corporate shield to hide behind. There aren't teams of people advising you what you should and shouldn't do. There isn't a PR department, a legal department, a best practices department, a marketing department to say, well, it'd be better, Brandon, if you did this, not that. Because you would say, well, that's not me. But this is what's happening right now. When I look across social media and people are like, oh, we'll help you with personal branding, they're using that word in lieu of what they should really be saying, which is we help you develop sales funnels so you can get more clients. They don't even understand what branding is, let alone personal branding. You have to understand the person. And I believe this, and I'll fight anybody on it, which is personal branding isn't so much about you trying to get customers, about you creating something. It's about you remembering who you are, the 6 or 7-year-old that's inside of you that has learned how to blend in with people, to get along in polite society and company, to strip away all the unique, weird things about you just to fit in. Because there's safety within the pack. There's safety in groups and numbers. And so what I try to help people to do is to let their inner weirdness out. And there's an expression that I heard recently that I really love, which is being different is better than being better. The reason why we pay that $2 premium is because that bottle of water is different. The reason why we might pay $300 for a pair of jeans is because it's different, not necessarily better.
Well, in developing that, our perception, I think what's complicated, I mean, businesses are simple. They have a product that they're trying to make, I think, more complicated than it is to create an affinity. But for you as a person, you're complicated. You are lots of things to lots of people. And I think that trips people up. So I'm curious, when you are thinking about whether it's for other people you work with or for yourself, developing a perception that is true to who you are, but shows people a side of you, how do you help refine that into a message that's clear?
I think all of us, if we're hitting our optimal self, might be 90%-ish at the highest end, truly ourselves. The remaining 10% is how we adjust to fit in different groups. And I'll just describe it this way. I'm a father, so I'm not going to talk to my children or treat them the same way I would talk to a stranger I met on the street. Conversely, I'm not going to talk to my wife the same way I would on a stage. And it requires different ways or different modalities or tweaking of the core you. So that 10%, I think, is the outer shell in us selecting what it is that we want to show to people. And I think that's perfectly fine. And if you're doing that today, I think you're doing a great job. You don't need to talk to me. You don't need to learn anything. The real problem is we don't show up as the 90%. We show up as the 30% of our real selves and the persona that we fabricate around us. And I'll tell you what I mean. You notice when you go into professional circles, how people speak a certain way. They're very formal in their communication style. They're very careful not to use words that may trigger or get themselves canceled. And maybe deep in their heart, they want to let their hair down, not wear a suit and tie, but they don't. So there's a lot of repression, and it's been done so long that they think this is the real them. And we can see this most clearly visible on social media. When everybody looks a certain way and they're busy running filters on their face, literally filters to change their skin appearance, and they're very selectively showing you very small fragments of their life. I'm at the pool, I'm on vacation, I'm eating this great meal. But then if you were to turn the camera around and really see them for who they are, they have mental health issues, they're going through a really bad relationship, they have been bankrupt 3 times, and they're barely keeping it together. But what they present to you is this wholly formed, integrated self that has got all their stuff together. And because we've been told, or we've assumed, this is how we must be in public to be accepted, to be liked, not to be ridiculed. And so I think people are barely even 30% of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'd say on the other side of that, there's also people that aren't showing the best parts of themselves at all. Maybe they are socially, but maybe not professionally. Maybe the best parts of them in business or in whether they're working for someone else or for themselves, maybe that part is only being shown to their current clients who took a risk on their work. But now we have this content marketing and these places for people to start to show up. But what do you think is holding people back from taking advantage of some of those opportunities?
You're absolutely right, Brandon. Thanks for reminding me of this. So it works both ways. We're either holding back the negative or we're also holding back the positive because we are fearful of a couple of different things. Mostly it's because of how we've been socialized that we can't talk about our wins very much because it'll feel like you're being too braggadocious, you're too self-important, you're taking up too much space. And it is generally frowned upon by large groups of people in America and across Europe and Asia, especially. And there's this thing about like tall poppy syndrome, getting too big for your boots or your britches. And so we celebrate this idea like being humble or humility. And so this goes against the grain. So if I achieve something, and I've been through this myself, let's say that my business hit a new all-time high in terms of revenue, and I was able to do, say, $5 million. I'm most likely not going to share that for fear of a couple of different things. One, oh, you just talk about yourself, or actually $5 million is not very much, or hey, people are going to steal my secrets, or who do you think you are? There's so much of that negative conversation that's going on that we repress that part. And so it's like a giant battle for us just to show up as ourselves. And if you are proud of what you do, you should say it. If you're not proud of things that you do, you should say that and say, I'm working through these things. It's the balance of these two things that I think form a more complete picture of who we are.
I think we might have some things in common. I know working in corporate for 17 years at agencies, I often was, I think, more ambitious than people were ready for. And I'd been told things like, you seem to have a chip on your shoulder, like you have something to prove. And it would show up in how I interacted with people because I was always raising my hand. I wasn't always humble. It was like, hey, I want my voice to be heard. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to follow my point of view, but I at least want to have a chance to say something. And I think that an entrepreneurial environment might be easier for people like us who might have chips on our shoulder than not. But what's your experience been as someone who has what's obvious to me and has the voice, has a distinct perspective and point of view? What's it been like for you navigating business and that culture?
Well, my primary identity is one of an educator. So I will use my voice if I think there's a way for me to help other people. And this is kind of important. So if I go and buy a fancy, expensive car, and if I show a picture of that car or me doing something with it, I ask myself, how does this serve other people? Is this helpful to anybody? And if it's just really about me stoking my own ego, I think that's generally frowned upon. And I don't mind that people frown upon that. It's like, I think the kids call it flexing, and that's what you're doing, And I think, I don't want to judge them. If that's what you want to do, you go do that. That makes you happy. What I'm talking about is if I take a picture of a fancy, expensive car, I want to tell a story. I want to tell you a reason or something that might help you. And so it's one of these things where, let's say if I buy a Porsche or a Lamborghini, I'll say, you know what? All my life while I was growing up, I've had this idea about people who own these kinds of things. And I've always thought that I am not part of that community, that circle. And for years when I could afford to buy it, I thought still, like, do I really want to join that community, that tribe? And let me tell you what's happening to me right now. And let me tell you like how you might learn from this experience from a mindset or limiting belief thing. I want to frame it around, can I serve people in the story? And if I can't, generally speaking, I probably won't post or share that.
Yeah, I think it's a difference between using that as proof of something that's, whether it's true or not, like, why is that the proof? As opposed to it saying, hey, I got this thing because I wanted to, and I wanted to share this story with you, as opposed to trying to maybe prove something that you're not. I love that approach and that thought. I kind of want to dive into how you started to, in your mind, get recognized for the work that you're doing. I think you've built a service-based agency business that was great, and there's still, I'm sure you're connected to that. But there's this other side of it, which has been the education you've been doing for so long in parallel with this, which is what I want to hear more about. Tell me about when you got started in coaching and teaching people.
Okay. I started teaching, I think, 5 years out of school. I was invited to teach earlier, but I made a personal rule that I needed to do something with my life outside of school because I didn't want to regurgitate the academic lessons I've learned. And so I need to go make it. I need to prove to myself that I've got something I can bring back to the table. So long before I make any YouTube videos, before anybody knows of me, because I've made no content, I was teaching for 15 years at a private art school. Actually, I had a couple. And that's what I was doing. So I was balancing work and teaching. And this is where I didn't realize this, but teaching those 15 years gave me all kinds of skills that I didn't know I was developing that I would later on use. And I'll give you the example. When I learned how to do brand strategy and facilitate a client meeting, I was like, oh, I can learn this. This is pretty cool. And my mentor at that time, his name is Jose. Jose's like, oh, you're pretty good at this. And I was like, how did I get good at this? Oh, I was teaching for 15 years, working with people who had crazy ideas, divergent thinkers, who had poor communication skills, and we were able to manage energy and get results. Well, isn't that brand strategy and facilitation? Except for the people in the room are much smarter, are much clearer in their thought process and know how to articulate their ideas. So this is way easier than teaching a bunch of art students. This is fantastic. And then when I went to make YouTube videos, it became pretty easy because I'm like, well, how do I do this without people in the room? So I have to pretend I'm having the dialogue with the student. I have to figure out what kind of questions where they might get stuck and pre-build that into the lesson plan. And so this gives me a huge advantage. So in 2014, when I'm 42 years old, I start making YouTube content. At first, it was like getting over this idea of appearing on camera and hearing my own voice and seeing my own face. Once you get over that, then you can lean into the teaching part. And I think that's how I was able to make that transition. Doing this kind of work, the teaching part at scale, is the most important work I've ever done. I've had the benefit of working on really big brands like Fortune 100 companies, doing highly visible national, international work, winning awards. That stuff is not nearly as important, as meaningful to me as being able to record a piece of content and knowing somewhere far away, some kid somewhere is going to watch it and say, wow, this really helped me. And I'm going to better my life because of that. And eventually, sometimes those signals come back to me and I get the reward of hearing how their lives were transformed. This is the deep, meaningful work that I'm dedicating the rest of my life to.
So I kind of want to go back and say, when you were starting that deep, meaningful work, I think sometimes we end in different places than we start. Maybe we find purpose along the way. But really, I'm curious about when you started it, what was the reason? Was it a second paycheck? Was it like you had just wanted to give back a little bit? You enjoyed that community? What motivated you to want to put in the extra hours that you didn't have to give?
You're very smart for asking that question. It wasn't on this big mission to change the world or to kind of reinvent the way that we do education to disrupt an industry. It was really because I had this interest in teaching. I wanted to do things fast and a little bit different than the way that I'm allowed to do at school. And I happened to reconnect with a former classmate of mine. His name is Jose, same person I was talking about before. He goes, Chris, you're interested in doing education and workshops. I've been doing this. Why don't we combine forces and come together and see if we can do something? So I'm like, how do we do this? He goes, we have to get onto YouTube. We have to build awareness around what we're doing. So the initial idea was marketing. It wasn't necessarily to teach for teaching's sake. It was to build awareness around a problem, a solution, and us as personalities to teach you this stuff because we need to sell you this product. And so initially, that's what we did. We created content as content marketing to sell a product. But that didn't go well for me because I was like, I didn't get into this to be a shill for our own product. It feels somewhat disingenuous. And I understood the very real business needs that we have to actually sell product. Otherwise, we don't get to do this. So this is very much a side venture that took us about 2.5 years before it actually really produced financial results. But the biggest lesson I learned in those early years was there's something about the goodwill that you're given when somebody clicks on a video. And if you break that will, they'll leave, they'll not watch the rest of the video, or they'll have suspicions about who you are and your intention. So when we made the decision to make content for content's sake to teach people, the views went up, the subs went up, the engagement went up, not by a little bit, by exponential numbers. And so that was the first clue, like, hey, you know what? Before we go and sell product, we need to create an audience community. And the way we do that is to serve them. And every time we did that, we would get results and the views would grow. And that made me really happy.
Was there like a specific moment in time where that clicked, or did something like or was it a reaction? Like you put something out there and you got a reaction to it and you're like, oh, we got to do more of that.
It's both. There's a moment in time. I think we're like 6-7 videos in, and it's a struggle for me to be on camera. I'm super awkward. And I'm asking my wife, because she's like, well, what are you doing? What is this YouTube thing you're doing? I said, what did you think? And she said to me, honey, I love you. Your videos are unwatchable. And it like was a dagger in my heart, Brandon. I was like, the person, maybe outside of my mom, who loves me the most, is saying, I cannot watch your videos. And she said things I already knew. You're disorganized. You guys talk over each other. What is the point of this? And I'm like, oh, shoot. I didn't want to hear it from her, I have to be honest, but she was telling the truth. And so I kind of went over to my business partner, Jose, and I said, hey, I want to do something different, man. No more selling, no more pitching. Let's just teach. Why don't we work on our keynotes? Let's respect our audience's time and their energy. And we created our first hit, which was something about like brand identity and design, something like that. And I worked all night on this to 3 a.m. I put together a keynote presentation. I pulled examples from real life. I talked about principles, things that I've read, and organized it. And we recorded this episode, and it started to take off immediately. So on a given day, our old videos would get like 50, 60 views per day, which I was really happy. I'm like, oh, 60 people showed up and watched this video. This is incredible. This video got 300, 400 views a day. So I knew already. So it's one of these things, you make one observation, you make an attempt, and your best attempt starts to work. I'm like, wow, how do we do this again and again? Well, guess what? We have to keep making more content just to teach and no pitching.
So what was happening at the same time as the YouTube content was starting to go, or before that even? Connect that to where you're showing up in real life and where you might be running workshops, speaking on stages. Did those parallel?
There's some overlap here. So I'm building a YouTube channel. This is like really my first attempt at social media as a human being, not as a company. And the first thing I do is tell all my students, hey, mean a lot if you guys subscribed or followed me. Why don't we just put in the syllabus, just step 1, follow me, and let's have the discussion online. So I was doing everything I could to grow the audience. They weren't really watching the content. It's all fine. But it's somewhere along the line, as I'm invited to do a keynote here and there, and I don't do that often. I'm not really loving public speaking. Somebody says, Chris, you're a design celebrity. Like, I am? And I think we had like 20,000 subscribers. It's like, not compared to these other people, this is nothing. I'm like, celebrity and me? No, I don't think so. That's somebody else. And I would just dismiss it. But eventually it starts to grow where these worlds start to overlap now, where the first way that people know me isn't for the work I do as a service provider in creating commercials and music videos, but it's through our content. And it starts to expand beyond our core demographic of creative people, like of designers. There'd be somebody who was like in line at a fast casual restaurant. It's like, I know you. How do I know you? I think I saw a video that you were talking about something about pricing on Facebook. Yeah, that's me.
How much are you speaking today? Like 12 months?
Public speaking, or how do you define speaking?
Yeah, like out, not on content, like out there in public, whether it's running workshops and trainings and speaking in the real world.
If I said yes to all the opportunities for public speaking, I would probably be doing 1 or 2 a week. Unfortunately, I have to say no because I can't run a business. I'd have no time for myself because I'd be on the road all the time. So the most intense I ever got was last year during our European tour. We went to, I think, 8 different countries, did 13 workshops in a span of about 5 weeks. That was brutal. Literally every day was up in the air, land, prep for the workshop, do the workshop. And if it was a 1-day workshop, pack, next day up in the air, land, following day. It was brutal. So it can be quite busy. And it's something that is a privilege that's afforded to me because I've created so much content. I'm not complaining. It's a wonderful thing when you can drop into a city somewhere in the world and a small group of people show up to learn from you.
Yeah, I asked because I think people would pay a premium to see you in person. And obviously that's a choice. Some people really want speaking to be their only thing or their primary thing. And I've also seen that some of the videos that have like started to continue to skyrocket on some of your channels tend to be the clips from you doing something in person.
Yeah.
And how that's played out for you. So I was curious what the strategy is or how you're approaching making those choices, whether you do something in person or just create it in your home studio, which would be easier.
This is going to be a confession, Brandon.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. I love teaching. I don't like making content. So when you're in my home studio right here, right? So I'm recording content and I might prepare a deck or the team will say, hey, we need you to speak about this. It's a drag. I procrastinate. I kick it down. Today's not a good day. Oh, the sun's not right. And, I don't feel right today. Something's off. I'll just make 1,000 reasons. Oh, I need to I got to go feed the cat. I don't know what it is. I got to do something else other than making content. But you'll see me in my totality when I'm working with people in a live space because I love real-time problem solving. So the reason why I think those videos outperform the videos of me just speaking to camera is because I'm working with real people. There's the reality of learning, which is it's a push and pull thing. I share a concept. I think it's obvious, but someone's like, that doesn't work for me, or I don't like the way you said that. And then we have to work through the problem. That friction in the learning is a beautiful thing. And I like the heat, and I also like to have fun. And so I would tell my students back before I was making YouTube content, my form of teaching is full contact teaching. This is not light sparring. We will push and pull. I will push you to the edge of your creativity and beyond, because I think we artificially limit what we can do. And so I will call you out, not in a judging, humiliating way, but I'm like, how else can we, like, where else can we go with this? And let's unlock your thinking. Why are we limited to this perspective? What if we looked at the world through the eyes of a calculator? How will we tell that story? Your whole life would be squeezed and punched. But let's try and look at it like that versus as a 5'8" person walking around looking at things at eye level. Let's try and change literally the lens, the perspective. And so I push people. So in the workshops, we have funny moments, and I like that. So I try to bring in a little bit of comedy and what comedians refer to as crowd work, where somebody says something, and I'll give you an example, right? I asked somebody in one of my early workshops, how much do you charge? He goes like, what do you mean, like hourly? Yeah, I said, how do you charge? He goes, well, I give them my full rate. And I said, are you giving them a fool's rate? Because a rate is limiting your value to a time, your time value to time. We need to unbundle that. Of course, I get a little chuckle from the audience, and I like to do a little wordplay like that. But then people watching can feel that energy, like, oh, he's a little sassy. This guy, you got to watch your P's and Q's with him. And I think that's what they tune in for. There's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I forget the guy's name, but he's like, anyone? Bueller. I think that's how we look at teachers. It's like monotone, and they're just marching, and they don't really care to hear you think or talk. That's the opposite of the way that I want to teach.
Yeah, I that's definitely the most memorable piece of content that it still sticks in my memory is you, I would call it arguing, but it was just a discussion in class about, like, is it my time that's valuable? So if I did this, if it took me longer, I should charge you more. And if I did it really quick, you want me to charge you less? Like, there's this whole argument back and forth, but getting them, like, asking questions and then seeing what they answer, so that it's kind of like together you have to come to some kind of agreement. That definitely sticks out the most. But it was in that conversation that these ideas start to, like, I think make sense to a lot of us. Like, yeah, I wish I could explain that to someone the same way he just did. That stands out. So you definitely have some magic in the room. And, as a fan, I'm like, let's do more of that. I want to see more of Chris doing that, but I love everything you're putting out. I would like to ask, for the people out there trying to continue to make businesses out of their knowledge and out of their thought leadership, when you started building courses and adding, like, education and coaching components to your business, what was that process like for you getting started?
The very first course I authored on my own was around typography. And so if I were to tell anybody, what is the first thing you should do? Look at the thing that you know how to do well, so easy that you don't have to think about it, that you can deliver a keynote tomorrow with like 30 minutes of preparation. That's where you should start. And you'll feel most confident. So when we went to launch our first course, we needed to, because I needed to prove that there's a real business here. It's not just like me saying funny things on camera. We needed to launch something. So our launch strategy was pretty straightforward. We announced, we say, like, we're going to launch a typography course. We hope you'll join us. And we talk about design. We do design critiques and reviews and things like that. So there's an awareness around the product in which you're ultimately going to make. And we don't want to do that after we make the product. We do it before we make the product. So I'd say, hey, submit your poster design, your logo design. Let's look at layout and typography, and I'll just make content around this. So the audience is starting to show up. We're priming them to accept that I'm going to teach them about design. And then eventually we're ready to launch. So what I do is I say, you know what? Here's the deal. Every week for 4 weeks in a row, I'm going to teach you typography from the course I'm going to launch live for free. It's going to disappear in 24 or 48 hours for real. So I was literally recording the course live with the audience. And I think into the second or third episode, I can't remember, I said, if you want to buy it at the lowest price possible, this is the link. I haven't even finished the course yet, but you can buy it now. And I think it was like $49. It was super cheap. The cheapest it ever is or was, right? So people would buy it. That's how we got our first six-figure launch, when I don't even know what I'm doing. And so by the time we did the third or fourth and final installment of this live broadcast, I think we had over 15 or 1600 people, a record for us still, of live people attending a stream. Because they're like, oh my God, this was good. What's the next one like? And each time you keep delivering, they keep showing up and we keep making it great. So that was the basis of the course, which then we had to spend weeks and weeks cutting, editing, providing additional resources, organizing, building the back end of the learning management system. So here we go. We're ready to go. We can launch. So everybody who ordered it got their thing. And that course is now sold, I think, over $1 million in revenue over its lifetime.
Wow. Wow. And to share the order of operations with people, it sounds to me like you started to build that audience first. And then we're like, what are we going to do to monetize this other than YouTube paying us? Is that kind of what it was like?
That is exactly what it's like. We built an audience and we focused on teaching. So an audience would show up and feel like, yeah, I'm genuine. Like I don't start selling you the minute you start seeing me. So there's a relationship that's being built, trust is being formed, and goodwill is being exchanged. This is very good. And then we announce something, and then we allow them to take the course pretty much for free. So it's the Mrs. Fields concept where they take a great cookie and they break it up into little pieces and they hand them out. Very few people who can eat one cookie is like, that's all I want. I just wanted that little bite. They got to go back and have the rest of it. And that's how Mrs. Fields creates new customers and spurs sales. Give people a sample of the product, and it has to be a really good sample.
And I'm obviously the live, which you mentioned, was what the main driver was for you converting some of that audience was pulling from the video into the live so that you have some timeliness to it. Was there an email list building component to this before, during, or something you're doing now? Or like, when has that crossed into your ecosystem?
Absolutely. Somewhere along the way, about 2.5 years in, my former business partner and I, we decided like we have different visions of what company we wanted to build. So we separated. And I was like, shoot, I just spent 2.5 years building up this other brand that now I have no connection to. I have to start over. We have to create a new Facebook page, new logo, new identity. And we did that. I was like, this is going to be terrible. It took us so long to get here. But to my surprise, because that relationship was built for 2.5 years with our audience or community, when we announced, some of them didn't like it that we broke up. They wanted us to stay together, Jose and I. But you know what? A lot of them followed. And we were able to rebuild our audience and triple our audience size to our Facebook page in a matter of months. It was wild because now I can create anything that I want. I can say whatever I want. There's no compromise. There's no like waiting for another partner to approve or build it with me. I just get to do it. So we started growing our email list really quickly. So it was like 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Today, I think it's over 100,000, but it contracts because we constantly clean out unopened users who don't open their emails. So it's around 100,000 people.
So thanks for that. Because I think the ecosystem is what's interesting because there's so many choices of what to do first and second and what or not to do at all. The other two things I want to touch on are the podcast and even the book. But let's start with the podcast. Was that always in parallel with the YouTube channel, or when did that start to be part of the ecosystem also?
The podcast started, I think, 3 years after the YouTube channel. So for chronology here, 2.5 years, I was doing it as the school. We break up, reform a company called the Futur, and we still get to keep the same YouTube channel. It's just I got a new skin on it. So it's the same audience. We're growing it. And then people are requesting like, can you just turn this video into a podcast? I just want to listen to this. It's easier for me to consume, right? So to this day, I understand the differences between the two, but back then I didn't. Podcasts you can listen to on the road. The relationship is very intimate because it happens inside your head versus like watching something. You can multitask. It's lower bandwidth option. It's a much more intimate relationship that you're building. So we would start the podcast and it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. We even called it something else and wrote music for it. And then I changed the name of it. Initially it was going to be called the Impossible Podcast, which is I Am Possible. And then we just changed it. We're just going to call it Future. We don't need to build too many brands here. We want them to be able to find it easily. So we kept the same music. It just, people are like, what? Why is this music? Whatever. Don't worry about it. Okay. And so that's what we wound up doing. And the podcast has become its own animal, its own beast. My podcast producer told me we're top 20 in 50 different countries, I believe, which is wild, under marketing. Something that I didn't want to do because our fans just asked us. Like, I relented. I'm like, fine, whatever, I'll do it. And now we're a couple hundred episodes in, and it's one of our most beloved things that we do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I found you through the podcast first and then got curious and then started to explore and finding videos and everything else. So it's interesting where people might come into that ecosystem. So congrats on the podcast. One of my favorites for sure to this day. And I want to ask about the book. I don't hear or see a lot of it. So I'm curious where it came from and like what it means to you.
Can I ask you a follow-up question with what you just said? Because we know podcasts aren't social. It's hard to go viral on a podcast. Like, how do people even find it? So how did you even bump into the podcast? I'm curious.
That's a great question. I feel like every listener is going to be like, feel the same way, which is you don't really know where you come across things sometimes, whether it was like a podcast, also like the one you're listening to, or this one, or if it was simply, it had popped up to the top of a category I searched for. So I think I explore podcasts more than most people because I do a lot in that space. So I'm constantly looking at full lists and I'm like, what is this about? So I don't know how it came across. I think I tend to find shows because I'm looking for one specific topic. And it might have been that I was looking for pricing, and your stuff tends to pop for pricing and how to set prices for anything.
Perfect.
So I imagine it was keyword related, but yeah, that's a good question. But I wonder the same thing. I'm like, how did you? And people are like, I don't know. You know?
How does anybody find any podcasts? Like, when you're part of a larger podcasting network, I've discovered the strategy. Basically, they have, say, 20, 50 different shows. They cross promote each other all the time. They give samples, or they tease, and then that's how you discover, and that's how the entire network grows. And it's a beautiful thing. But when you're a solo podcaster, which is, I think, the vast majority of people, it's very hard to be discovered unless somebody says, hey, I listened to this thing, Brandon, you need to listen to this. And you're like, all right, I'll give it a try. And then you get hooked.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the book now?
Yeah.
My book, it's called Pocket Full of Dough. And it's one of these things that I didn't mean to do, just like the podcast. And our audience, community, fans, and say, could you just, we love the way you think. Can you just write something? And so the strategy for the book was, I don't know what to write. I'm not a writer. I'm a designer. I try to avoid words as a living. I want to work with images and type in a way that I'm not writing the words, but I manipulate type. So my strategy was, let me just go back in my Twitter feed and look at the post that had the highest engagement. So I had one of my team members scrape all the tweets that I had and rank them and organize them into different categories. And that was the beginning of the book. So I would take a tweet and I'm like, what did this resonated with people? So this is kind of me pre-beta testing and doing kind of like market survey without them knowing it. Well, if they like this, then I can just build on that. So my strategy for the book was a collection of very short, highly easy to digest, like one page, you just read it, and I'm going to pair it with a visual that kind of sums up the theme or the concept of what is written. And I'm just going to organize it into a book. We kickstarted it, able to make some money. And I was like, okay, this is going to work. So I think we had the goal of selling $30,000 worth of books. I think we wound up hitting about 80K. And as a first-time author, relatively unknown person, self-publishing, that was the home run and then some. The really cool part to that story, Brandon, is that for Kickstarter, we had 5 people in the top tier who would buy a book for $1,000.
Wow.
And the people who showed up, it's like, I didn't know you cared so much. I'm just truly just touched right now. I really am.
That's awesome. Yeah. When the fans come out of the woodwork and they're like, I didn't even need the book. I just wanted to support you sometimes. That's what they'll say.
Well, let's be honest. Who needs $1,000 book? No one.
Yeah.
It's purely to support you. And I don't want to name this person because I don't want to be all weird about it. But the one person who supported me at the highest level is another author thought leader in the space that I'm a fan of and follow. So when I saw it come through, when the orders all came in, I'm like, wait, what? Oh my God, this is crazy. So I was just thrilled.
I like that. And I'm curious now, you kind of triggered a thought for me, which is when you are looking at your community, the people like your peers, the people you go to for answers that you've kind of developed relationships with, where have you found that you tend to run across those people? Is it like through speaking? Has it been just completely random? Are there certain types of people you tend to connect with more often? Like how does that community building, relationship building, networking work for you?
I don't know about you, but I'm an introvert. So when I get invited to network or meet or talk to someone or be introduced, I'm like, oh, do I have to? Do I have to? And more recently, I would say in the last 2 years, the level of people I'm introduced to and get the opportunity to meet are at levels far, far past where I'm at. I'm like, okay, I should drag my butt out of bed and I'll show up and, comb my hair or whatever and just show, I don't have any hair, but I'll do it. I'll just show up. Okay. I'll do it. And then you get invited to these things and there are really wonderful conversations with people who have diverse experiences and expertise. And there's so much that you learn. And once you achieve a certain level of success, let's just say like you generate more than a couple $1 million a year. I think you acquire a certain skill set, a mindset, a belief system, a work ethic that I find very admirable. I might not love you, I might not love your business, but you've done something with your life. And it's real interesting to be able to meet these people. And so usually it's just, hey, we're going out for dinner. I'm putting together a very select list of people. It's usually 3 or 4 people. It's not much more than that. Otherwise, my brain gets like, oh, this is too weird. I got to go. And I'm having wonderful conversations in those spaces.
Yeah, I like that. And if people, I think if people wanted to get to know you, work with you, or just tap into what you do, your courses, obviously they can check out the content that's free, the Future podcast, the Future on YouTube, and that's without the E at the end. Or they can check out some of these courses you've built. Now it's not just one course, there's a full kind of slew of them.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in hearing what the business boot camp is about and who it's for, because that seems like one of your bigger programs. Tell me more about that.
It is. It's our most expensive course that you can buy. The business boot camp was this idea that if we needed to compete against Stanford's D School for Design, which is they try and teach business folk creative skills, which they're recognizing that this kind of divergent thinking is actually really good for solving business problems. Why don't we have a B school for designers? The mirror opposite, the yin and the yang, so to speak. So we were like, okay, what does the curriculum look like? What are all the parts? And I kind of drilled it down to 7 things that you need to know. And they involve communication, being able to do discovery, pricing, handling objections, managing your project and scaling leadership, those kinds of things. So we mapped it out and we created these modules and then we launched the thing. It's $5,000 to enroll in the course. And it's our version of you getting a fast track to the most relevant business skills that you need to know to be a successful entrepreneur, not just to survive, but to thrive.
Yeah. And that's all at thefuture.com.
Yep.
Awesome.
You go there, there's a quiz that you can take, which will then help direct you to the right products. We're always trying to do a better job because as your library grows, as you've kind of hinted at, it becomes more confusing for people. It's the paradox of choice. Too many things to look at, people that don't do anything. So we're trying our best to use different tools and technologies to help assist people in finding the right thing. Hopefully one day there's a chatbot that you just talk to that's powered by AI, not via scripts, that can just ask you lots of questions and say, okay, based on this, here's what we recommend. And some of those options should have nothing to do with this. Just read this book or watch this video on the internet or go to this workshop that we have no association with.
Yeah. I'm curious I haven't built the AI bot that like captures your knowledge and it's a virtual you that answers questions yet, but I'm curious to see how that space kind of evolves. But I'm curious about your thought leadership and your approach to it. Maybe you don't think about it like that when you're just sharing the things you know, but how do you come up with great ideas or the things that you want to talk about? Like maybe in the beginning versus now, because maybe it's changed over time.
Well, in the beginning, you go with what you know. And if for me personally, there was all these moments when my former students would say, oh, I never thought of it that way. Well, that's a pretty good clue as to a piece of content that you would make. And a lot of what we do is kind of by accident before it becomes by design. So I was making all this design content thinking, well, that's what I've learned how to do. And I'm going to just share this with you. But the thing that starts to take off is the business content. One of my former students graduated, he's starting a company. He goes, Chris, I always respect how you talk about business and you tell us the war stories from the field. Can I get some help with figuring out how to do my business? And I said to him, you can pay me, or we can do this live on camera and you don't have to pay me. Being a new grad, he's like, I like the free option. So he comes into the studio. He just asks a bunch of questions. I don't know what he's going to ask, but it doesn't matter because I'll be able to figure it out. There's a whiteboard. I start drawing and writing. He's not even on camera and he's not even properly mic'd, but he'll ask a question. So that video starts doing well. And I'm like, maybe this is what I was meant to do. There are a lot of designers who make design content for other designers. I don't know that there are that many people who are making business content from designers from a perspective of I'm a creative as well, right? I'm sure there are a lot of business, sales, marketing people who are helping other people, but it's like by designers for designers, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's really the clue. And so once you make that, you see in the comments, oh, this is striking a nerve. But then they have, of course, more questions. And you just take their questions and you say, that's really interesting to me. I'll explain that next and I'll just get into that.
No, thank you for sharing that. And what I'm thinking about as we're kind of coming towards the end here of our time together is I'm wondering on this journey in the personal branding space, like the stuff, obviously agency work, you're going to have some things that you run into, but I'm curious, as you were going through the teaching and creating online, building courses, YouTube videos, all the things, what was the thing that was really hard? Like something you ran into that you're like, this, I'll get past this, but right now this sucks. What was maybe some of the hard parts of the personal brand growth that you've experienced?
Okay. I think it can be hard for a lot of people. It's not so hard for me, but I can see how it impacts the lives of the people I care about. So my wife starts to feel like I'm kind of losing you to the internet. They're finding out too much about us. We're very private people, and it feels like I'm always available to answer their questions, but I'm not so available at home, so there's this struggle to kind of sort this out. And it starts to bleed into our real life because when we travel, we go on vacation, there's some weird random spots that I'll be in and somebody will like, hey, and then my family knows and they're super cool and supportive. But I think they can only handle so much of that when there's like, can we take a picture? Can I ask you 2 questions? And I try and tell people, look, I'm with my family, happy to take a picture. You want me to sign something? Happy to do that. And then we go on with our lives. At the beginning, it was like bemusement, and then there was a novelty to it. And then it was like, this is kind of annoying. So you go through that arc. And my kids, my wife, they all love and support me. So it's like, we see this lights you up. This is why you do what you do, to hear from them. And they tell their stories. And when I relay those stories to them, there's some really like tear-jerking, pulling at heartstring stories where people have been able to do something with their lives. And it's just, to me, that's like my source of fuel. To know that some kid was like living at home making $20,000 a year, just saying, I live in that house right there in this amazing thoroughfare, and I did $100,000 last year because I just followed what you said. And they're just like beaming and like, what did I do for you? I said, you don't do anything. You just keep winning. That's what I care about. You keep applying and you keep winning.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's happy to be helping more people, but you don't want to be celebrity famous. I'll be introvert famous, not celebrity famous. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Any final thoughts for people who are out there interested in tackling this, to taking on, putting their personal brand out there, sharing them more of themselves with the world? Any final thoughts for them?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of different things. Number one is that action beats intention. This applies across everything. Like, oh, I meant to pick you up at the airport. I meant to do the dishes. Well, I don't really care what you mean to do. Did you do it or didn't you do? The Yoda thing, like do or do not. There is no try. Just do it. And this is true when it comes to creating content. And I think it's so scary to make content because it seems like all of the people that you know and don't know are going to judge you, and it feels like the weight of the world. So let's shift the perspective from wanting to be an influencer or a thought leader, from building your personal brand. Let's just say it's a form of public journaling. Journaling is important because we need to take inventory of the things that we think and that we know, to just chronicle the day, to like reflect. And reflection and the ability to look at what has been done and how you process it is a very great form of self-education. So most people would not argue against journaling. Okay. Well, if you were just take your journal and share that publicly for no one else but for you or some younger version of you, just do it for that. and stay out of the results. Just if you can't handle the heat, just post and just leave it there and move on. Maybe after 30, 60, 90 days of doing this, go back and look at some of the comments and just look at the comments that are constructive so that you get feedback for how to grow. Not because you have a punchable face. There's nothing I can do about this. Or who do they think they are? I would never trust somebody wearing a cap. Like, okay, that's not constructive for me. But there are things like, hey, I was confused. Or what did you mean when you say this? Or did you know that this is the case and not what you said? Those are all constructive things to me. And they're really how we can grow. So we have to have a different relationship with critique. We can't look at it as tearing us down, but tools for us to build a stronger, more fortified house. So I look at it like that. And if you could do that, I think you'd do really well for yourself.
Well, I hope this inspires people to do some of that personal journaling, to take a chance, invest in your self-development through taking more action. And as Chris says, and as Yoda says, there is no try. Do or do not do, right? Well, I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly, but yes, take action. Action is everything. Well, I appreciate your time today, Chris. Thanks for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Brandon.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
You've just taken your marketing knowledge to another level with this episode of Brands on Brands. But we have plenty more ways to help you build a brand that matters. Head over to brandsonbrands.com for resources, as well as access to our blogs, videos, and exclusive coaching sessions with your host. Be sure to visit brandsonbrands.com.